Welcome to another episode of Worlds Collide, the podcast where I talk to people who moved abroad, and I am your host, Victoria, and thank you so much for tuning in today. So before I start, I just wanted to mention two things how you could support this podcast. One is, if you haven't done so already, you could give me a 5-star rating wherever you listen to this podcast. Or if you are a listener on Apple Podcasts, maybe you could even write a sentence why you like this podcast, because that always helps to get more attention. And then there is this other way now. I set up a buy me a coffee, so you can also buy me a coffee and let me stay energized for recording. The link is buymeacoffee.com/Worlds Collide Pod, just all one word. And then, you can give however you like, $1, $2, $3. Yeah, that's up to you. I appreciate it so much. And if you want, I can also do a shout out to you. But if you don't want, then please just mention it. It's like, no shout out necessary. Anyway, so much for that. And now I want to tell you about this week's episode. This one is extra special because I don't have a lot of episodes out yet on the continent of Africa. And this one is about Marion, who moved to Rwanda, and this was so off my radar, and I'm sure it is off so many people's radar. So she talks about how her life is in Rwanda, and I'm not gonna take anything away from this conversation. But before I let you listen to this interview, I just want to mention that I record the interviews always like a few weeks in advance, sometimes even like a month or two. So after we spoke, there were these conflicts in Rwanda with Congo. So I just mention this right now because she says so many times how safe she feels and how safe Rwanda is. I just thought this will make you wonder, probably. So that's why I wanted to mention it. But I just talked to Marion too, and she is safe and things are calming down now. So that's why I just wanted to bring it up. But here is the whole thing. Here is our conversation. Okay, so my guest today is Marion. Hey, how are you?
Hi, Victoria. Really nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Where are you right now?
I am speaking to you from Kigali, Rwanda. So sort of part of the East Africa community, but geographically kind of Central Africa.
I don't know anything about Rwanda. So can you tell me a little bit about Rwanda?
Yeah, I can tell you a lot about Rwanda. I've been here for a long time now. I mean, just to get it out of the way, most people, when you say Rwanda, the first thing that they will think of, if they have heard of the country, is the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, which is usually what comes up first. That was over 30 years ago now. And I have been here since 2007. So I've kind of been a part of the country and seeing how it's changed over that time. And it has really changed. So I think when a lot of people first hear Rwanda, they've still got that in their heads. But would be incredibly surprised to actually see the city now. It is unrecognizable even from the time when I first turned up. When I first got here, the center of town was mud roads. We had a sort of a welcome ritual where you became a proper citizen in Rwanda if you fell down a pothole, because there were a lot of them, and no street lighting, big potholes. And now you have perfect tarmac, not just across Kigali, but all the way to cities outside like Gisenyi and Musanze. And big buildings now, very big buildings. And so it definitely, I think, would surprise a lot of people when they first step off the plane.
I just looked on I just checked some pictures of Google, and I was like, oh, this is like a proper city, it
Oh
looks.
yeah, it
I
is.
also, I mean, I had like nothing, I don't know, like no imagination, but yeah, there was like high-rise buildings, a lot of greens.
It's a very pretty city and very, very green. We have palm trees down the centre of all of our roads in the city now, and lots of pretty green spaces. People say that it's clean, it's green, it's safe. That tends to be the three things people come away saying about Kigali. Well, Rwanda in general.
Okay, so Kigali is the capital city
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah.
And so why did you choose to go there in the first place?
Oh, that's a convoluted story. I'm not sure that I'm still not to this day, I'm not sure if I chose Rwanda or if Rwanda chose me, but it was a very long time ago. I was in my mid to late 20s, and my whole life I had been working in sign language and in the deaf community. And so I had done my first degree in sign language. I had worked for a national deaf organisation in the UK, and an opportunity came up to train as a sign language interpreter. And my whole life I thought that's what I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to do. And so I started the course, and, for whatever reason, I didn't enjoy the course so much. Maybe the course didn't enjoy me so much. And I think, we all, at least once in our life, sometimes more than that, we chase something that we really, really think, this is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I'm going to be. And then you get there and you're like, oh, maybe that's not what I'm supposed to be. Maybe that's not what I want to do.
Okay.
And so I kind of, I hit that pretty hard. And I dropped out of the course. I did an MA to buy myself some time, again in sign language. But at the end of it, I was like, well, I don't know what to do. I haven't got a job. I haven't really got any plans. The thing that I thought I wanted to do, I don't want to do anymore. So I thought, what's the biggest roll of the dice I could make? And I applied to join VSO. So if you're American, you're listening to this, VSO is the British version of Peace Corps. So they basically take...
Okay.
Yeah. Most people have heard of Peace Corps. Very few people tend to have heard of VSO.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but they take professionals with professional skills and a bit of background experience, and they match them up usually with NGOs or schools or educational establishments or medical establishments, all these different fields, usually in economically developing countries like Rwanda. And I was offered two positions. I was offered Kenya or I was offered Rwanda. And the job in Kenya, I think, was to do with deaf education. And the job in Rwanda was to work on developing the first dictionary of Rwandan Sign Language. Exactly. I sort of went, aha, that sounds really interesting. But at the time, as we said at the beginning of this, everybody I knew only had one image of Rwanda. They thought that is a war-torn country. You're not going to be safe there. You shouldn't go there. And so gently, my family was saying, I think you should probably go to Kenya. but
do you remember what year that was?
2007 that I first came here.
Okay.
So 13 years after everything that happened. And I thought about it for a bit, and I've always been somebody, I like the road less travelled. If I haven't heard very much about somewhere, I want to go and have a look. And that to me was Rwanda. And I also liked the project more. So I came to Rwanda, and the hilarious part, well, not hilarious, but slightly ironic part of it was that the very next year, a few months after I'd arrived, there was an election in Kenya, and the place was literally on fire. There were pictures of Kenya all over the world having this massive election unrest. So I was sitting safe and cozy in Kigali going, oh, chose the right one.
You're glad that you didn't go there.
Exactly, yes. So that's how I ended up here. And I spent 2 years working as a volunteer. And then I left and I started working in international development. And I came back again.
Still in the deaf field?
No.
Or in the sign language field?
Yeah, no. I actually felt we published the dictionary in 2009, and it's always been a project I've been incredibly proud and privileged to have been a part of, because it was just incredible. Not just creating it, but sort of documenting. We went all around the country documenting the different signs used by different communities, you know, because everybody's got their own regional dialect. So that was an incredible project to have been involved in. But when I got to the end of it, I kind of felt like that part of my life was done. I kind of felt like I'd done everything that I could do in that area. And, you know, I'd left the UK to kind of go and explore and use my skills elsewhere, but I didn't feel going back to the UK that I would really have a place there, you know, to do that. So one thing that was quite amazing is, whilst I was with VSO, you get involved in so many different fields because there's such a skill shortage, and, you know, such a lack of people at that time to get involved in things, that you get a bit involved in everything. And it's still a little bit like that to this day. I think that is something kind of nice here. There are a lot of things we don't have, but that's also a lot of opportunities to get involved in things, you know. So no, during my time with VSO, I learnt a lot about development planning, the language of international development, you know, key performance indicators, writing all the documents. And so you can apply that to pretty much most other fields. So I went back to the UK, and I worked a little bit in Armenia. I worked a little bit with UK organisations, some in disability, some not in disability. And then about 4.5, 5 years later, I went to visit a friend in Kenya. And I thought, well, you know, why don't I just pop back past Rwanda and see what it looks like now?
Yeah.
And I went to see some friends for a couple of weeks, and that turned into a couple of months. And 10 years later, I'm still here. So.
Oh, you just didn't go back
I
after?
just didn't go back. Yeah, I stayed. It was when I got here, I realised there were so many people still here that I'd known. And Rwanda makes it very, very easy to move here. Like, they make it very, very easy to get a residency visa. And they're pretty welcoming of anybody who wants to come and, you know, see what the country's like and see if they can get involved in something. So, yeah, I just did.
Okay, all right. So, a question. So, when you decided, I just gonna stay, whatever, instead of a few weeks, a few months, did you have anything with you except whatever, a suitcase? And
No.
also, like, where did you move to? Did you get just a place or?
Yeah, I did. I had my suitcase. I had some clothes with me. A very, very good friend had also recently moved back. And she collected me at the airport and drove me to, well, first to a restaurant where we had a really big meal, and then to a shared house that I had booked myself into. Really, really nice people. Again, people from all over the world, just living here, working here. So I stayed there for a while, and then I went through a series of quite dodgy houses. And then I found my forever home, which is the one that I'm still in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was easy.
And did you then just also just go out and get a job, or?
I registered a company. I was in a bit of a lost space again. I was sort of, I don't know what to do with myself, so I'm going to focus on work.
Oh God, I've been there so many times.
Yeah. I think, I think there are some very common stories that most expats have in their life, and that feeling of, oh, right, what do I do now is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I registered a consulting company and just got to work, really. And again, you know, setting up shop in Rwanda is not too difficult. Well, it depends. It's difficult in some ways. The administration can be very difficult and frustrating. But opportunity-wise, if you're willing to go out and talk to people, you can go and talk to anybody. We tend to sort of talk about Kigali as being a bit of a village. You know, it's like there's 1 degree of separation between anybody. It's quite a small city. I think we've got about just over 1 million people in Kigali, I think. So it's a huge population in the country. It's a country of about 14 million, but Kigali itself is not terribly overpopulated. And people are generally quite welcoming to talk about business and development. So, you know, you can find yourself talking to people that you wouldn't normally think you get an audience with. So,
Okay. And did you do business consulting, or what kind of consulting?
Yeah, well, development consulting, which is sort of like the non-profit form of business consulting. So yes, strategies, plans, fundraising, anything people needed, I could turn my hand to most of the time. Yeah, I did that for a very, very long time. In fact, I still do it sometimes. But I was talking to a friend of mine who was a teacher for many years, and we kind of came to the conclusion that with development work and with teaching, it's kind of one of those things for, you have to be young and idealistic. And, you know, when you're young and you're idealistic, it's the perfect job and it's fantastic. But then I think you get a bit older and you want to hand over the baton and sit back and, I don't know, watch Netflix and drink a beer, you know.
Yeah, it kind of gets worn out, or wears you out a little bit. It's tiring,
does.
Yeah.
It can be a lot. So yeah, then I set up mostly I do piano repair and tuning, but there aren't that many pianos, so I still do a bit of consulting to kind of make up for the lack of income.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, of course. And so you mentioned earlier Rwanda is safe. Because like I mean honestly, like I don't know a lot about African countries, unfortunately. And I just had an interview with somebody who moved away from South Africa because there's like economics, politics, crime are like usually the top reasons for leaving South Africa. But of course, it's a different place. Is this always a concern?
Well,
or not always, but sometimes.
I think when you're talking about Africa, it's such a massive continent with so many countries and so many different cultures and communities. And yeah, people find it hard to believe when you say it, but Rwanda consistently ranks in the top 2 safest countries in Africa usually every year when they publish. Yeah, they publish the statistics. Violent crime is very, very, very rare. I think as the cost of living's gone up here, as it has all over the world, and youth unemployment, I think it you know, I think more people take chances now than they would have, but still, I think for me, one of the biggest parts is it's incredibly safe for female travellers. Like in the years I've been here, I've travelled all over the country on public transport. I ride a motorbike. You know, I don't get harassed. I don't get, you know, it's quite... We talk about a Rwandan reserve. People here are very reserved. And so, you know, when you talk about Africa, there are places you can go. If you go over the border to DRC, you go over the border to Burundi, even Uganda, you know, it can get a bit crazy sometimes. People are very expressive, very sort of, you know, not shy about coming forward sort of thing. But in Rwanda, people are generally very respectful of each other in that way. Sometimes to the point where it can be a little bit off-putting. You know, I've known people in Rwanda for 5 or 6 years, and I still couldn't entirely tell you what they think of me. You know, because there's so much of that reserve. But at the same point, you know, if you ask somebody for help, they will usually help you. It's, you know, it's a pretty chilled country in that respect. As a foreigner, if you're going out into the rural areas, do you know the word Mzungu? If I said no, Mzungu. If you move to East Africa, you will learn that word very quickly. It's basically, it's the East African word for a foreigner. People say it means a white person, but that's not true. It means a foreigner, somebody who's not from these parts, not local. And, if you go out into the rural areas, you will often have a large group of children, sometimes adults, running down the street shouting, Masange, Masange. But, nowadays in Kigali, in the capital cities, the bigger cities, you don't hear it anymore. It's people have got a lot more used to seeing foreigners here and are generally pretty welcoming. And I think, again, that's reflected in the visa entry is so easy because the country is very open to people coming in and, bringing skills, bringing, themselves. And so, Rwanda definitely very, very safe, and especially if you're a female traveler.
Good. Okay. And is English the main language?
That's tricky. No, it's a very strange mixture. So the official language is Kinyarwanda, which is the Bantu language of Rwanda. For a long time under colonial rule, it was under Belgian colonial rule, and therefore French became.
I saw that. Yes.
French is very widely spoken, but then later on, it switched to English. So there's a very, very heavy drive now towards English. So most young people now, and the average age here is now about 20 years old. So most people, it's a very,
young.
very young population. And most people are speaking English. So you had a question.
Oh, you mean the population of Kigali?
No, Rwanda.
Or the population of Rwanda?
No, of Rwanda.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's changing fast. And so there was a big switch. So at one point French was banned and it all moved to English, and now it's a dual language system, and we've also now included Swahili as a national language. So it's a lot of different languages.
And which language do you communicate in?
I get about perfectly fine in English. I speak
English.
Mvuga Kinyarwanda Ngiche, so I speak a little bit of Kinyarwanda. I can order food, order drink, get home in a taxi. I can keep myself alive, but I'm not particularly fluent. But yeah, English.
Did you learn this in a class? Did you learn this in a class?
Yeah, well, I was very, very lucky because when I said I first came here with voluntary services overseas, and they are a huge international organisation. So before I left, I had pre-country training where I got cultural training, I got language training, and then when I arrived in country, I got more language training. I was part of a very large network of people in the country. So I learned a lot of it when I first arrived, and then over the years I've tried to kind of add to that by taking classes, and I've discovered I've never been very good at learning spoken languages. I'm quite good with sign languages, not with spoken languages. I lose vocabulary very, very quickly. So I find that I learn really obscure words, like the word umufumu, which means witchcraft, or kwezi, which is the moon. I learn the words for things that are pretty or interest me, or I like the sound of them, but everyday things like, can I have some bread? Nope, that's gone immediately. So I don't learn anything useful.
I got it. Okay. And have you ever thought then of going back?
No, not really. I kind of keep assuming that if they're going to keep renewing my visa, I'm going to stay. So if they kick me out, I will.
So do you have to renew your visa quite frequent then?
I renew it every 2 years, and it costs me 150,000 francs for the 2 years, which is roughly about $100 for the visa for a 2-year visa. And yeah, it used to be when you first arrive and you first get your residency visa, it's, you have to have an interview. They send people over to your house to see, that you are who you are and to make sure that everything is as it should be. But then myself and my friends who have been here for a very long time, we started to notice over the past few years, they don't bother with that bit. It's like, I think they've come to the conclusion.
Okay, they met you already.
Exactly, yeah. If she was going to be trouble,
Yeah.
we would have known by now. So yeah, it's a very, very easy process to renew now. I can make an application. And the next working day, I can get a confirmation saying it's been approved, come and pick it up. It's really easy when you've been here for a long time. So I don't know what it's like when you very first arrive now, but from what I've heard, it's pretty straightforward.
Right. And by now, could you also somehow get like a permanent residency?
Yeah, the permanent residency is a sore point for me because I don't know. In Europe, usually if you're resident for somewhere for 5 years, you can then apply for a permanent residency.
Yeah.
When I first moved back to Rwanda in 2010, it was the same here. And then in the year that I got to my 5th year and I became eligible, it went up to 10. So I kind of, I can't help but take that a little bit personally. You know what I mean? They like sort of, oh no, she's eligible for permanent residency. Must stop this.
So now they changed it to 15.
Exactly. Yes. When I get to 10, they'll put it up to 20. No, I mean, I think I am eligible now, but they've made that a lot harder. So it's very easy to get a temporary residency for 2 years at a time. But to get the full permanent one, you now need to be employing people. You need to show a certain level of, I think, I'm not entirely sure because it's not very clear what the exact criteria is, but I don't think I know anybody who's ever got it. So I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure why that is.
Okay.
I could also apply for nationality, but at the moment I'm happy just to coast with my visa. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's cool then. But so you said like, when you got there and you decided to stay, you went back home, home to the UK in between a few times.
Yeah, I there was one point I didn't go back for 3 years. And also throughout the pandemic, I was here, so I didn't go back.
Yeah,
But
of course.
I now tend to go back a little bit more often, so once every 1 or 2 years at the moment. I like the UK, but I think I would find it difficult to fit back in there again and find my place. Rwanda is home to me. I know how everything works. It's home.
Sure.
The longer you leave it and the more years go past, I don't know. There's something in the UK that just doesn't feel very positive at the moment. I don't know if it's it's hard to say without sounding too critical, but I mean, I think that's a very big difference between, I'm going to say, I don't know about all economically developing countries, certainly in Rwanda, we're very I don't know how to put it. We're very positive about things. So I don't have a television, a radio. I don't really read the news. But when you do hear things, everything's good. Things are getting better. There's a positivity. Sometimes it's hyperbolic. Sometimes it's too much. And you're like, yeah, okay, calm down a bit, But there's a sense that tomorrow is definitely going to be better than it is today, and that you're part of something. And it's growing and it's building. And yeah. And I just feel with the UK, I'm going to say
it's more the opposite.
Yeah, people are down all the time.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. It's more like they're focusing on the negative,
all of
just
the
complaining
time.
A lot.
And you're looking at it and you're thinking, but you've got all of this, you've got a really strong economy, you've got all the technology, you've got all the educational institutes, you've got why is it always so, it almost feels like the UK is depressed, permanent state of depression. And I think as well, 24-hour rolling news doesn't help because it's doom, gloom, murder this, something awful's happened, and people don't get a break from it, Whereas I think
maybe that's part of it. Yes.
I do think, and I think maybe go on.
I talk about this a lot on this podcast because you also live in the sunny place.
Yeah, that helps.
I assume. I don't know. Do you have Yeah. So I think people who live in a sunny place always have a better mindset. They're more positive, more happy, have a smile on your face versus being bundled up already,
I think there
miserable
might
weather.
be
Everything.
something to that, the outdoor lifestyle, or being able just to walk out in the sunshine. Yeah, I think there is something to it. I've always thought that people who live in sunny places with a beach, with a coast, because we don't have that, we're landlocked, but I always think
Yeah,
people who
you're
live on the
landlocked.
coast and a sunny place, they're always very happy. But I do think there is something to that. I mean, it is weird here because something you don't think about when you move to the equator is the fact that the days and the nights are always exactly the same length. So it's sun up at 6 o'clock in the morning,
Never no
sundown at
thought of it either.
no, and neither did I till I moved here. And of course, in the UK, in winter, it's freezing cold and it's dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And in
Yeah.
summer, it can get dark at 10 o'clock at night. But here, you never get that variation of temperature so time feels a bit different here. It feels like everything's sort of one very long day, and it's harder to tell if time is passing.
Is it a little bit like the movie Groundhog
I was
Day
going to say
when
Twilight
everything
Zone, but
is
yeah,
the same?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. You wake up, yeah. I mean, here it's sort of you tell the seasons by wet or dry, whereas in Europe and things, it's cold or hot, so it's
Like
slightly
cool.
different that way. But yeah, it can feel that way. It's hard sometimes to keep track of days when you don't have a seasonal cue telling you. But it is very nice here because we're at quite high altitude. We have the mountain gorillas here, and because of that,
Oh, cool.
we get the altitude. It stops it from getting too hot, so we don't get the really hot savanna heat. We get a cool. It's usually between about 21, 28 degrees all through the year, so it's pleasant.
And can you tell me a little bit about the Rwanda lifestyle?
I guess working for myself, I get to duck out of too much of the working sort of lifestyle side of it.
Yeah.
I have quite a flexible schedule, but something I like is it's pretty laid back. It's a very nice quality of life in terms of social life, in that, yes, people are working, but you can take a break and go and have lunch with a friend. And like I say, because Kigali is quite small, it's not hard. You can get across the city in 20 minutes max. You can always find a restaurant or a cafe and just sit and chat with a friend. We do have the thing here about time. I'm not going to get too technical about it, but there's difference in time. There's countries in the world who are very punctual, and there are countries in the world who are not punctual at all. This is definitely not a punctual kind of place. You can set a meeting and somebody will say, I'm coming, and then like 4 hours later, they're still on their way. Very few people ever actually arrive,
Okay.
But
Okay.
we call it African time, but I worked in Armenia for a while and it was exactly the same there. So I think African time is a misnomer. I think it runs deeper than we often think.
Is it also like this when you, let's say, have a plumber coming or somebody who has to fix something in your house?
Yeah. We say the word nakibazu here, and nakibazu basically means hakuna matata. It's like, yeah, whatever. It's like somebody's coming here, maybe.
Okay.
I think people have been working a lot harder to be punctual. There's definitely more of an adoption in office culture of punctuality, and we call it respecting the time. So, you're respecting that you should be there on that time. I don't know. It's a difficult one. I have a Congolese friend who kind of explained it to me once that, for Europeans and people who are very punctual, it's infuriating. It's horrific because you've made this agreement for this time and nobody's turned up, and then they'll turn up 3 hours later and But my Congolese friend, he kind of tried to explain it, like the West has the money, but Africa's got the time. Is you see time as money, therefore you're always turning up on time, and it's disrespectful if you don't turn up on time. Whereas for us in Africa, he was saying, the person that you are talking to is the most important person. So, it's more disrespectful to say, right, I've got to go now, than it is to say, sorry, I'm late. But it's still annoying. I don't think, there are some things that you will never adjust to, no matter how long you live in a different culture. And I still think punctuality is one of those ones that drives me slightly up the wall. But yeah, you just got to kind of suck it up.
Okay. And are there other things that you find it hard to get used to?
Hmm. Yeah, I've got to say, as a country, we're not fantastic at customer service. Things can often take a lot longer than
Ah.
you expect.
But not in terms of being unfriendly.
No, no, not really. Unfriendly, not really. There is something that is actually called the Rwandan stare. Which is where people will stare at you very, very hard without a smile and will just look at you quite sternly for a long time. But it's a strange one because it is a very noticed thing that a lot of people who visit do say this, and it can feel a little bit intimidating. But I guarantee you, if you say sort of miliwe or amakuru, like hello, and you smile, the person will just smile, big smile back. So they're not really thinking something bad, but there's kind of this sort of watching face of curiosity. You tend to see it more in the villages nowadays because still, there are a lot more foreigners in Kigali now, but there still aren't that many out in the wilds of rural
Right.
Rwanda. So
Right.
it's still quite an event for a lot of people to see tourists and foreigners coming through. So you do sometimes encounter that smile. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, there
And
is,
the customer
yeah.
service you just meant
Mm.
it takes a long time.
It can take a long time, and there's not that kind of. I think in a lot of Asian countries, you get a big smile and you get a welcome come in. In a lot of, well, I was going to say a lot of European countries, maybe not the UK, but you get a lot more kind of, hello, how can I help you today? Here
Uh-huh.
it's more up to you to go and ask for what you want and hope that somebody will sort of follow through on that. We're working on it, okay? We're working on it. It's getting there, but
Okay.
it's I don't think that you can sometimes overestimate how fast many countries are having to run to catch up to where we have been for a long time when it comes to things like customer service. If you've never had to do that before, and most people who are working in hotels don't go off on their weekend and stay in hotels. Most people who are serving in restaurants don't go and eat in restaurants, so it's kind of learning very, very quickly what Muzungus and people coming to visit expect and kind of trying to catch up with
Mm-hmm.
that. But I mean, people are
Uh-huh.
really, really going for it because tourism is one of our biggest incomes. So people are getting there. Mm,
All right, and then I just wrote
mm,
down
mm,
because you mentioned a few times
mm,
going to restaurants.
mm.
So, what is Rwandan food like?
Yeah, I think it surprises a lot of people to know that in Kigali we have a lot of international restaurants. We've got a lot of Japanese food, Korean food. We've got a lot of Italian food. We've got a lot of burgers, chips. We've got a lot of different international
Uh-huh.
restaurants. We don't have a lot of Rwandan food restaurants specifically. Um, and I don't know why. It's a difficult one. One of the national dishes, the national dish is called zingalo, and it's actually cow intestine, like as a skewer, as a kebab, and
Uh-huh.
it's actually pretty good. But you don't find it served in restaurants. You can go to a local resto and get it, but you don't see a lot of. Yeah, I don't know why. I think the reason is because most of the people who can afford to eat in restaurants are foreigners, and so they're catering more for the foreign
Mm.
palate. So you can go and eat food from around the
Mm.
world, um, but it's sometimes harder to find Rwandan food. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And if you go to a supermarket,
mm.
is it just like whatever, like a regular supermarket, like you would expect in the UK, or is it different?
It's different. I think it's a lot smaller. A lot of our supermarkets are much
Mm-hmm.
smaller, and stuff runs out here. So there are definitely a lot more supermarkets now catering again to foreign tastes. So we have a lot of imported goods, but anything imported is usually quite expensive, and it also is subject to disappearing. I mean, over the past 10 years, I remember times when milk disappeared. I remember times when tinned kidney beans disappeared for about 9 months. And it's stuff that you wouldn't expect not to be able to find, but suddenly it can disappear. Those kind of supply issues are becoming less nowadays, but we are absolutely landlocked and we're right in the centre of Africa.
Yeah.
So basically, it generally costs more for people to transport goods across land to Kigali than it does to actually ship them over the sea to the ports in Mombasa and Dar es Salaam in the first place. So, it's very expensive to get things here. So you kind of got to be used to the idea that you won't always get what you want. Like every now and again, you'll see somebody who's just arrived in an expat forum saying, where can I get, I don't know, Marmite or I don't know, Reese's Pieces? And you're like sitting there saying, I don't know, possibly America. Have you tried there?
Okay.
And it's not to be flippant about it, but you've really got to adjust your expectations, because even some days water, you wake up and there's no water. Some days you wake up, there's no electricity. It's getting less in Kigali, but you've got to...
But you mean like water, you mean like out of the faucet or bottled water in the supermarket?
No, water out of the taps. You always keep an emergency bucket of water. Or if you've got the money, you install a water tank, which will get you by. But you can't always guarantee anything, So you've got to kind of... It's part of the interesting part about living here is you just got to roll with it sometimes, and you've got to plan around
Is that
things.
Yeah, is that ever a problem? Like when you're like, oh, dang, I have like no electricity, or...
Yeah, when I've got to get up and go...
Is it something on a regular basis?
It's not as regular as it used to be. It used to be. I've lived in houses that had no water at all. I've lived in houses that had beautiful bathrooms with shiny showers and all beautifully tiled and absolutely no water, and I had to have it delivered by jerry can. That is getting rarer. I think if you're a foreigner coming now, you can definitely find housing that is a lot more prepared with generators and water tanks. I mean, I live quite modestly. I live in quite normal housing, I don't live in the sort of €1,000 a month big shiny buildings. I live in a neighbourhood that's quite, local. So I think depending on your budget, I mean, you could absolutely solve that. It is a problem. There have been days when I've woken up to go to a really important meeting and I've turned on the shower and nothing came out. And so I have to wash myself down in a bucket in the garden. And of course, like if we're having this conversation here, there is definitely a chance that the electricity could just suddenly cut out, and when that cuts out, it takes my internet with it. So there are days when you plan to get so much done and you can't, but at the same point it's a relaxed lifestyle, so you can go down the local bar and have a beer instead. So
always see the positive.
It's adjusting your expectations.
And also, since you mentioned it, like could you describe the housing, like of an apartment where you are versus an apartment in the UK?
I've actually done a video about that.
Okay.
Maybe you could pop it in the thing below. It's a very old video and I wasn't quite used to making them, so it's a bit of a stinted kind of thing. There are so many differences. Most houses in the UK have several stories. So, ground floor, middle floor, attic. Here, a lot of bungalows, though within Kigali, they're trying to change that. They're trying to make it so that, only multiple story houses can be built in Kigali. My roof is made of tin sheeting. So when it rains, it's like you hear the rain very, very loudly. Whereas when I go back to the UK, I can be standing in the kitchen. It can be raining outside and I have no idea that it's raining outside. I guess the upside of it is that you don't need central heating because it never gets cold enough. So that's cheap. Electricity and water are a lot cheaper than the UK. There's a lot of differences.
And you also mentioned the walls are very thin
Yeah, the
before our
walls.
conversation.
Yeah, the walls are thin, and I think this is something that you find in most warmer climates. Like I noticed southern Spain is a bit like this as well. Is, you know, because there's no
Oh,
insulation, there's no double glazing, and here, in order to keep the houses cool, you have breeze blocks around the top,
yeah.
so between the ceiling and the top of the wall, which is literally just holes from the inside of your building to the outside. So if somebody's outside shouting in the street, you're going to hear everything going
Oh,
on, you know.
I got
So
it.
it's important to pick a quiet place to live if you can. Noise
Do you,
protection is a problem. Yeah.
but through those holes, do you sometimes have like lots of big insects coming in?
No, because we've got mosquito netting on it, so it prevents the mosquitoes.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. You do have to
Okay.
be a
So,
bit
because I
careful
was
about that.
thinking like, oh God.
Yeah, yeah. No, you have to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, fun story, but we don't have that many big insects in Rwanda, or big spiders. It's very, very rare to see anything. We do have large cockroaches occasionally, you know, in the bathroom,
Uh,
but
yeah.
other than that, no, it's very, very rare. I mean, we have snakes, we have scorpions, but it's very, very rare to see them. You could live here for many, many years without seeing a snake or, yeah, big insect.
And since you're also so high up in the mountains, um, it's not too hot then?
No, not for us. It's generally between about 21 degrees to 28 degrees throughout the year. It
Oh,
never
that's
generally goes,
nice.
oh, it's beautiful. It's like a spring or summer day, you know, it's really, really nice. The coldest is usually around 17 degrees. But of course, if you live here for a long time, that does feel cold. Like it can be
Feel
17
cold, yes.
degrees and I'm sitting there in a little jumper. But then I get
Yeah.
pictures at the moment from my family in the UK, and they are under snow. You know, it's like 0 degrees there at the
Yeah.
moment. You're like, "Oh my goodness, I couldn't cope with
Yeah.
that." Um, yeah, it's generally a very pleasant climate. Yeah, the annoying thing is we're just not quite high enough to get rid of the mosquitoes. So if you're in Nairobi in Kenya, you're at such an altitude that you don't get the mosquitoes, whereas we're just below that, so we do. So you
Uh,
need to take a few precautions,
that's
like
why you have the mosquito nets.
mosquito nets and bed nets. Yeah, important to have.
Hmm.
Mm.
And what would you suggest to somebody who's thinking about moving to Rwanda?
Well, I guess it depends why you're coming here. If you're setting up a business or you're retiring, lovely place to retire. Um, I
Ah,
would suggest come for a few months, because at the moment you can enter on a 30-day tourist visa. So from any country in the world, you can turn up and get a visa on arrival. Nobody has to book one before they arrive. It's also a
okay.
free visa if you're from a Commonwealth country or a La Francophonie country. They waive the visa fee. So really easy just to turn up for a 30-day tourist visa. When you're in the country, you can extend that to 90 days. So you could spend 3 months here
Mm-hmm.
and just check it out. There are some absolutely wonderful things about the country. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful in parts. It's easy in other ways, but there are also frustrations, like I mentioned. Sometimes the pace of life, the customer service, it can really drive you up the walls. So, you know, you need that time to spend here to see how you feel over a longer period of time before you apply. But, you know, I tend to think that everything in life is a choice. So you can choose to move here, and if you don't like it, you can choose to move somewhere else, you know. So I think you don't lose anything by coming.
Yeah, and do you remember for you in the beginning when you were settling in what the biggest hurdles were?
Well, for me, when I was first settling in 2007, it was a very, very different country. So for me, water and electricity would have been some of the very biggest hurdles, and no internet.
Uh-huh.
Today, what are the big hurdles? For me personally, I find the noise issues can be a bit of a problem. I think everybody finds that a bit of a
Okay.
problem because the city is growing so fast. Like, they are putting up new buildings everywhere all of the time. So sometimes you don't get the amount of sleep that you want. I don't
Okay.
find very much difficult, but then I have to, I have to reiterate, I've been here for years. So, when I
Mm-hmm.
first got here, you have that, what do they call it? Like the newcomer's curve where you arrive and you're full of excitement and you're full of everything's amazing and
Yeah.
brilliant. And then it's like, oh no, everything's terrible and I don't know how anything works. And then you find your level. And I've been leveled off for several years now. So not a lot kind of really gets to me too much.
Yeah.
Minor irritations. But for me, I'm very happy here.
And how how did you make friends? And also, is it easy to make friends with the locals?
That's an interesting question. Well, again, for me, I had an advantage because when I arrived, I was with VSO. There was a huge
Yeah.
group of people, and we were living in local areas. So we were living
Yeah.
in local communities rather than hotels. So that made things easy. We also had a lot of Rwandan staff in the office, and they were very helpful because they'd
Mm-hmm.
seen Muzungus come through before, and they knew what we needed to know before we needed to know it. So,
Right. Yeah,
that
you
was
were not the first. Okay.
exactly. It's like, oops, I can see the
Yeah.
mistake she's about to make. Yeah. So that helped. But I think just over the years, I've made friends. I think it's changed a lot over the years. I talk about that Rwandan reserve, which can make it quite hard. And a lot of people say, it used to be quite hard, I think, to make Rwandan friends. But now it's a very young population and a population that are online and that have also traveled. And, they're up for it. They want to meet people and talk to people. So I think you go hang
Mm-hmm.
out in places, you meet people. Like your landlords and your community and your neighbours. If you buy somebody a beer, you've got a friend, it's like you can sit and talk.
Yeah.
And I think it can be difficult with the financial disparity because I think people forget when they're coming from Europe and they're coming from America that economically developing countries, that is a name for a reason. You might not have a lot of money and might not be living a lavish lifestyle. And you might not be considered wealthy where you come from, but you will
Mm-hmm.
always have more money than most people in the country are likely to earn in their lifetime. And so it can create difficult dynamics, So
Mm-hmm.
there are people who have most people have a very specific idea of what the West is like and what developed countries are like. And everybody from there is very rich. There are no problems there. Everything is, so I think it can be difficult because people come to you with a lot of expectations
Mm-hmm.
and you can have a lot of expectations in return. And so I think the friends that you make over time, I don't know if this is right or not. Maybe you can tell me what you think, but you tend to make friends of a similar economic status or social background or,
Yeah.
so, and that isn't about being African. It's not about being British. It's not about, you find people of different levels in every country that you go to. And yeah, it's,
It's like yeah, that anybody who has something in common with you,
yeah,
anybody
that's
you
it.
share the similar views, or
Hmm.
anybody um I
Yeah,
don't know, like, yeah, has the same background,
yeah.
it's like you have already like something to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's it. And, a lot of the friendships, you have friends from all different walks of life and different economic backgrounds, but as well, it can be very, very difficult when there's a huge disparity between
Yeah.
and a very different expectation within that. It's not impossible, but you do tend to gravitate towards people who are kind of similar to you in every country that you go to, kind of thing. And that might not be the way it should be, but it often is. But you do need to find those people, I think, when you're living. I mean, especially in Africa, but especially in countries that are very different from the country that you grew up in. You need local friends. You need people to tell you what's going on. You need, you need to know where to get things and how to do things and the appropriate way to do things. And you can't get that if you're just surrounded by expats. One thing that's very, very, very good in Rwanda, in Kigali, is we don't have expat communities kind of in the same way. If you go to Kenya, there are areas of Nairobi like Karen or Woodlands where all of the expats congregate. It's the neighborhood for the foreigners, you know. We don't have that here.
Okay.
Yeah, because the city is very, very safe. So you can live anywhere in it. There are not neighborhoods where you go, don't go there. You know, there are neighborhoods that might be a bit more lively, but you can still live anywhere in the city. And because of that, there's a huge integration of foreigners and locals. You don't feel like all the foreigners live over here and all the locals live over here. It's very integrated, which I think really helps.
But you would also have like, for example, like a Rwanda expat Facebook group or something, or is there like a get together, something like that, or not even that?
There is an expat forum on Facebook, but I wouldn't say that we all know each other. You know what I mean? We don't all get together and hang out. Like, about twice a year now, the British High Commission, they have like a party at the High Commission, and you can go along and meet other British people, but you can turn up there and not know any, you know, I mean, you'll always know people who've been here, but it's quite common just not to know other British people or other foreign people. And also there's a high turnover here. You know, a lot of people come for 1-2 years and leave again. So people and faces are always changing, but then you've got the people who have been here for a long time, and then you've got the people above that who've been here for a very long time, but they don't all kind of integrate, you know, like mix and socialize. It's kind of a quirky place.
So we're coming to an end, but I want to ask you about your YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah.
Because you also have a YouTube channel about life in Rwanda.
I do. I started this, I can't remember if I started it, I think just after the pandemic, but it's just called Writer in Rwanda, because I occasionally write books, and it was going to be a channel mostly about writing. But then I realised people were way more interested in life in Rwanda, so it's now mostly about life in Rwanda. I do a few different things on there. But if you're moving to Rwanda or you're interested in the idea, I do quite a few videos on there, like how to apply for your visa, what the houses look like, things like that. And if you drop me a question, like asking me how to do something, I will probably make a video about it. So, yeah.
All right. And it's called Writer in Rwanda.
Yeah.
And I will make sure that there's a link to it in the show notes, so people can just click on it and will find it. And then maybe we can also add the video of the housing in Kigali.
It's a very old video. I'm a bit embarrassed by it, but yeah.
We don't have to. We can also leave it out.
Maybe, yeah. I should really do another one, but yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Yeah, no, it was really fun. It was really nice to meet you and hear about Rwanda.
Thank you.
And that was Marion. Wasn't it nice to hear about Rwanda? So definitely check out her YouTube, Writer in Rwanda. And I checked out her video with the one that we were talking about, the one how her apartment looks, how people live, and it's so interesting. So she shows you how she's baking, and how the washing machine works, how the bathrooms look, then mosquito nets around the bed, all of the things. It's super interesting, and check out her other videos too. And you'll find the link in the show notes. Writer in Rwanda. Okay, and that was it from me. I hope you liked this episode. I enjoyed this one very much, and the next one will be there soon, next Thursday. And until then, bye!